So in this video, we're going to add a little bit of recoil to our gun to give a bullet spray and to add some visual feedback that our gun's firing by adding that nice little random movement in our gun to indicate that we got a live ammunition being fired here. So we're going to spend our time in the hierarchy. Once again, we're going to have to reposition some of our parenting just to make sure it's just so. So I'm going to take gun position. I'm going to knock it back out of my first person controller here, and I'm going to reset its values back to 0. So I got my gun at my origin point again. Next, I'm going to create a new empty game object, and this one's going to control the rotation of my gun as it recoils. So I'll call this recoil rotation, like so. All right, and I'll make sure its values are reset. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to parent recoil rotation under my gun position, and then I'm going to take my machine gun prefab and parent it under my recoil rotation. So we have gun position, recoil rotation, followed by my machine gun, followed by my shot spawn. Very specific hierarchy that we're following here in our hierarchy panel. All right, so got that going on. Next, I need to put my gun back where it should go. But in fact, let's see. Let me parent my gun position underneath my first person character controller right there. And I'm going to test something. See how when you start the game, it lerps up to our starting position? So that's not so noticeable. Why don't we just go ahead and position our gun the way it should be? So I'm going to go to my hip position, and I'm going to reactivate my ghost image of my gun up here. That way I can go and grab my gun position and get it more or less in the same, match it up in the same area. All right. Just be as exact as you can. I'm not going to worry too much about it. I just don't want it to be a big noticeable jump when we start at the game. All right, that looks about good. And I'm going to deactivate that ghost image of my hip position. And now we're kind of back at square one. So let's test it and make sure we're good. Yep. So all we've done is just create an extra little game object that we can control our rotation on. All right. So why don't we go up and bring our shoot script up. And we're going to have to account for a few things here. Some new variables are going to be made. So why don't we say public game object dot recoil rotation, like so. And that's what we'll assign our recoil rotation game object we just made to. And then we're also going to have a new public vector 3, and we're going to call this recoil angle. This is going to be the value that we're going to be randomly giving values to so we can make our gun just jump all around. All right, cool. So why don't we next, what do we got to do next? We got to make some private floats down here. This is going to be what our random values are going to be assigned to when we're figuring out just the random rotations of our gun. I'm going to just call it random act for accuracy X, or current rather, and current ACC Y. That's ACC for accuracy. And then I think I need to add some new public floats up here. We're going to add hip ACC. Why don't we just spell it out since it's public this time? Oh, forgot the semicolon. There we go. Those two values right here will help determine how tight our hip fire is and how tight our aim accuracy firing is. So that's all we should need for our variables. Why don't we just jump into our code right now? All right. So we're going to just go right on down to our input mouse 1, because we need to give random values to these temporary current accuracy variables here. These two variables right here are going to hold the random numbers that are going to affect our recoil angle, and it'll get our gun pointing in different directions. So why don't we use some random ranges and give those accuracy variables some values here. And you'll see what I'm doing in a second. Random range. And then we want to do the negative aim accuracy, because as we hold down mouse 1, our right click, we're going to be in aim mode. So we're going to take the values on aim accuracy that we apply in our hierarchy, like so. And then what we're going to do now is I'm going to just copy this line of code and just change Y. So now we have temporary placeholder or value keeper for our accuracy in the X rotation, and a random placeholder for our Y direction accuracy. So these two values right here will hold our temporary rotations based on how much accuracy we give our aiming. So we're going to kind of do the same thing again. I'm going to copy these two lines of code, and when I'm not aiming, whenever I have it at the hip, I'm actually just going to say hip accuracy. All right. If you double click words, I'm just copying and pasting hip accuracy into these. So these two guys right here, these two lines of code, are separate from these because in this conditional statement, we're holding down right click, which means we are aiming down our iron sights. So we're going to be basing our random ranges off of our aim accuracy float. And if we're not holding down the right mouse button, we're going to be basing our random ranges off of our hip accuracy value that we've declared right here. I'm going to hit Control S, just make sure that we got some new values showing up here. So if I select my first person controller, there we go. I have hip accuracy and aim accuracy. I also have rotation, recoil rotation there. And while I'm at it, I'm going to take my recoil rotation in my hierarchy and drag and drop it onto my recoil rotation in my inspector. All right. And you'll see I have this recoil angle. It's a vector 3. So we're going to be constantly, every time we fire a bullet, changing the values of our X and Y that we can then update our rotation of our gun to add that kickback feature or that recoil feature that we're hunting for. All right. So now that we are getting our random range going on, let's see. Why don't we hit play? Let me get it off of maximum play. All right, nothing's happening yet. What we need to do is we need to give an update. We need to go to our, we need to update our fire code routine here. All right, so to do that, it's going to be one line of code, but it's going to be fairly complex, something a little bit different than we're used to seeing. All right, so what we're going to do, I'm going to add it, give us plenty of space so we can see what I'm typing. We want to change the local rotation of my recoil position. So effectively, we want to mimic what I'm doing right here, right? We want to add a lot of rotation there. All right. So we need to do that through code because I don't think you want to be around for your player to wiggle around the rotation handle for them as they're shooting. We need to do it through code, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to take our recoil rotation game object dot transform dot local, not local scale, local rotation. And we need to reset this value. And since we're dealing with angles, we're going to be dealing with quaternions, which is Unity's way of handling angle values in rotation. Quaternions and angles are black art inside of Unity. They're really complicated. So we're just going to try to make this as painless as possible. I'm going to explain it as simply as possible too. So we've seen a vector 3 lerp. This lerp right here, remember, it makes that transition from hip to our aiming really seamless. So that lerp is what makes it kind of smooth. It interpolates from our hip position to our aim position. What we're going to do is we're going to add a quaternion lerp, which will basically control the same kind of thing that vector lerp is doing, except it's going to deal with rotations instead of position. So what we're going to say is quaternion dot lerp, and it needs 3 arguments: from where is it lerping from, to where is it lerping to, and how fast does it do it. So to do that, we're going to say where are we coming from. We're going to be coming from quaternion dot Euler, and Euler is the way where we can convert vector 3 values into quaternion. values, and we're going to say recoil rotation dot transform dot local Euler angles. All right. Then put a comma. That's where we're coming from. Our local Euler angles, our local quaternion rotation that we're currently at. We're going to go to quaternion dot Euler again. And then this is where we plug in our recoil angle that we set. All right. Well, we haven't really updated recoil angle, but I know that's where we want to go to. Our new recoil angle is what's going to be updated with random values every time a bullet's fired. And then we're just going to do a time dot delta time. And we're just going to close it off. We need to do something before we're able to shoot this gun, though. We need to update our recoil angle to a random value every time we shoot our gun. So what we're going to do is we're going to say recoil angle dot x equals current ACCX recoil angle dot y equals current ACCY. And those two lines of code, every time we're fired, will pull up a new random range of values we have going on over here. All right. So there we go. Well, is that the best way to do that? Let's think about it. In this line of code, we're constantly assigning random values to our current ACC. So why don't we see what that's doing in our inspector by turning our current ACCX and ACCY to public. All right, and I'm going to select my first person controller. Now you can see I have current ACCX and Y. All right, so it's not updating quite yet. Did I save? Let's see what happens. All right, we're right on track. Let's go back to our code and get our random values to be cycling again. So now before we can fully test it, we have to give our hip accuracy and aim accuracy some values here. So what would be a good place to start? Why don't we give our hip accuracy a value of 60 and our aim accuracy a value of 20? And let's see what happens now. All right. There we go. You can see my gun. There we go. And hip fire, we're just all over the place with our hip fire. And our aim, the sight, it's not as bad. We're still getting some spray. And everything's looking good so far. We just have one problem. Whenever we're done firing, our iron sights don't go back to our center of our crosshair. So this is one of the crosshairs really handy right now. We're seeing that we're not going back to our crosshair when we're done firing. We need to do one more thing right here in our shoot script here. All right. So get key up. There we go. We're going to add a new if statement under our input get key down. We're going to say if input dot get key up key code dot mouse 0. Basically, we're saying if mouse 0 or left click is not being held, then we're going to reset our position of our recoil position. And we do that by saying recoil rotation dot transform dot local rotation equals quaternion identity, which is basically saying zero it out. Quaternion identity is 0, 0, 0 on our rotations. So let's see if that works. And it looks like we're good. We're snapping back to our center of our crosshair. And hip fire, it's really noticeable. In fact, let me maximize this on play so we can get a better idea of what's going on. So we're rotating, and we're having that recoil. And look at the bullet spread hitting that cylinder. See how there's just a nest of bullets. There we go. And at this point, you know what, guys? We don't even need our crosshair image anymore. But instead of deleting it, why don't we just deactivate it? Now, we are purely just relying on our iron sights to make our shots, more in line with shooters of today. But that crosshair was necessary because it allowed us to troubleshoot to see if our recoil was working or not. And you can see after I quit shooting, the gun snaps back to the center of the screen. It fires all over the place. There we go. And that pretty much sums up this part of the video. We've added recoil. We've added that bullet spray. So in the next video, we're going to keep continuing with our gun setup. Some things we're going to hit are ray casting. So we can, instead of shooting actual prefab bullets, our gun's just going to shoot invisible rays or invisible little lasers, I guess you could call them, just straight lines. And those rays are going to collide with objects in our scene, and that's what's going to detect our collision if we hit something with our fire or not. We're also going to add a slight little zoom effect from whenever we go into iron sights. Right now, it just kind of doesn't make sense too much. I mean, it gets the job done, but it's not too much of a zoom. So we're going to do that by directly accessing our field of view. You can see in my game view, if we do field of view, then it's basically like zooming in. And we're going to access that in our code in a coming video. All right, so that's what's coming up next. And for all intents and purposes, our character controller for our first-person shooter will be more or less done.